As we leave the Keepers of Order behind, we've got another few DLC missions pop up. The first involving the angry scientist of Might Gine, Wolfgang, having a green envy burn in his eyes over just how plain cool the mechs of the assembled Twilight Knights are, even as he believes his own machines are better than them. Now, Wolfgang, divergent design concepts make for better engineering when they are later amalgamated. Just look at the Gurren Satan as an example of that. Better to build on a good idea to make it better than have to construct one whole cloth. While at the same time, Wataru is gushing about being able to fight alongside his heroes, Koji and Maito. Though in both groups' case, it leaves others in their ensemble to be neglected. In Wolfgang's camp, it's his 3 assistant engineers and robot pilots, and in the hero camp, it's Boss, who has a massive ego around him and thinks he deserves as much credit for victories as Koji does. Thing is, his Boss Borot robot and its pilots are, let's face it, gag characters, and it's where the gag character gets the most love. So these side cast members go out and find each other to complain to. Wolfgang's minions thinking if they can strike at the Twilight Knights, it'll make Wolfgang value them more as people than his creations. And Boss ends up encouraging them by mistake. And them fighting drags in everyone else. Wolfgang ending up defending his subordinates himself from the others' assaults, because no matter how obsessive a personality he is that can end up putting himself on the bad guy's side, Wolfgang is overall a decent man. And the additional irony from this mission is, at the end, after Boss gets punished for acting solo like this, well, his crew might not have the sheer popularity of the hero, but Boss's resilience and willingness to charge into danger regardless with his ramshackle of a machine has it bear its own fans as well. Meaning, them acting out and being punished is their own damn fault. The next one after that, however, is a contender for the best of the DLC missions in this game, in which Cross-Ange's Salia finally hits her limit for stress and dealing with the insanity of this world, and thus has a psychotic break because she's not been able to indulge in the most relaxing hobby she has, pretending to be a magical girl. You know, cosplay like she did in V was understandable, with the differences in cultures from Cross-Ange's core story. Here in Elworth, however, where there's a wealth of magical users, it could be instead seen as a mental condition. And that's kind of how this is more framed. Salia's kept this more hidden than before, and Sparrow, being an actual magical familiar, stepped in it hard, thus roping Omri, Lelouch, and Sho into helping her indulge in one of her fantasies. Ah yes, the magic of prestidigitation! Lelouch and Sho were both chosen for this for two reasons. The first is they fit in the party of a magical group by being the stalwart knight and the exiled prince. And the second is they know how to keep their mouths shut. The hilarity of this, however, comes into play as Lelouch fully embraces playing along. After all, one of the things that is missed in Code Geass is Lelouch was always an actor playing to the audience called the world. So doing so again here among comrades, and to help a comrade not lose her mind out of stress, is a no-brainer, as this is the sort of genuinely kind person Lelouch truly is. Leaving Sho, ironically enough, as the only sane man among them to be their straight man. They go out and exterminate some uncontrolled keeper golems, but unfortunately Salia's zeal to indulge in her delusion ends up drawing more golems to them than they'd planned for, necessitating more of the knights come in as backup, and due to the speed of paramels as units, those reinforcements include Salia's squad, who she least wanted this exposed to. Now the breaking point for Salia is Ange being among that group, but as we discussed before, both in Cross-Ange canon as well as V, Ange could not care less about what Salia does in her free time as long as it makes her happy and she doesn't harm anyone doing it. I figured she would be more concerned about the more condescending members of her squad seeing it. Fortunately, her current costume is a glamour Omri just cancels and takes the blame for, so all that results is Ange continuing to tease Salia through the remainder of the stage, mentioning the darkness that must reside in her soul for that to be her greatest desire. And I gotta admit, the writers had to know what they were doing on this one. Salia in Japanese is voiced by Eri Kitamura, who is known for a lot of roles. Mina Ashino in My Hero Academia, Saya Takagi in High School of the Dead, Juri Han in Street Fighter IV Onwards, as well as in Project Cross Zone, and alongside Yoko Hikasa is one of the 2 Japanese VAs to voice Juliet Starling in Lollipop Chainsaw. What? I liked Lollipop Chainsaw. I'm actually looking forward to the remaster, which has only been announced at this point as I record this. But this actor homage is mostly tied to when she portrayed Sayaka Miki in Puella Magi Madoka Magica, what with the common worship and desire to become a magical girl. Ironically, this is not the first time that Kitamura's role as Sayaka has been homaged like this, as when she portrayed Ranko Hanjo in the series My First Girlfriend is a Gal, the 7th episode dressed the character she played up as Sayaka in her magical girl form. And as I have long attested, if Japanese media has a chance to make an actor illusion joke, they're going to find a way to take it. And while the panic over her secret fantasy being out has flushed the thoughts of stress from her system, Salia still wants to have that glamour applied to her again and again in private, so she can play out her fantasies as much as she wants. What makes for the crowning punchline of this entire event, though, is Salia wanting Amari to also create upgrade forms to this outfit, in Super, Eternal, and Princess varieties, all of which being references to Sailor Moon, where Amari's actress, Satomi Sato, voices Sailor Moon's best friend Naru Osaka in the series' Sailor Moon Crystal reboot. Like, there was no way the writers did not know. Back to the main story, the girls help Amari decompress from the personally invasive assault she's experienced over the last few stages, helping rebuild the collective resolve of the lot of them while letting off some steam. While among Mike Guy's Black Diamond League villains, we are reintroduced to Joe Rival, as was this small lost child having stumbled into their midst. This is Tora O, Duokdar's son, whose ambition is to be the strongest being on Alworth. Lofty goals, brat. Still, he sought out the BD League to learn from everyone in Duokdar's camp how to become stronger. Which is good. Diversify your options. Joe agreeing to lead him to a fight with the Twilight Knights, as Maito and everyone else return to the spatially displaced Auto for resupply. Since they're in a safe area, they let the kids go off to play, and in the midst of a game of tag, that's where Tora-O is dropped in among them. And this makes it pretty clear that Tora-O's been around nothing but adults his entire life, as he doesn't really know what playing is. Clearly, recess is outlawed in the oppressive Aristotska of Duokdar. Oddly enough, Tora-O does know what marriage is, and his interactions with Himiko during the game makes him respect her strength due to it being different from his own. Which actually is surprising for an antagonist to recognize various forms of capability beyond just brute force. Granted, that segues into him not quite knowing what a wife is and thinking it's a special type of servant, which he wants Himiko to be. A wife is a life partner, not property, dammit. And Tora-O learning in turn that Watcher is the savior that Tora-O wants to fight. But he's not ready yet, as his goal here was to deliver one of Joe's challenge letters to Maito, as this is the point where the game gets to the Maigain events that trigger Maito's mech exchange, the confrontation with Joe that follows, wrecking the Locomorizer main body of the combination, requiring Maito swap over to the Kaiser machines and Mike Kaiser for the next few stages. What helps in this iteration for the later recruitment of Joe is Purple actually intervene in their honorable duel, dealing additional damage to Maigain that tipped things in Joe's favor, which was the last thing Joe wanted, the rest of the knights intervening until Maito can rejoin the battle. But to complicate this for some reason, Basque and several of the G-Reco enemy aces pop up here. Why? By game mechanics, the designers wanted to give players more recruitment points for some of the recruitable G-Reco antagonists, such as Mask and Rock Pie. Story-wise, there is no reason. Like, they try and do stuff with the Toasanga-related characters, and Araya viewed as a traitor by them for supporting Bellry and Ida, and I don't care. G-Reco didn't make me care about them, and neither did this game. So they serve no purpose than to be intrusive to plots I am invested in. Really, it's a little more than a distraction from Purple's callous, continuous bombardment of the city. Wolfgang charging the Senpujing concern's main facility in hopes he can force a surrender before anyone innocent gets hurt. But that just leads specifically into the Kaiser's introduction, as both it and Simon double-team his unit, where it's revealed that its one weakness is a drill. Because Wolfgang really, really loves drills. I mean, they do pierce the heavens. This event also flagging another detail of Mike Gein's story that didn't get focused on in V. That Wolfgang might have become an ally up front in another timeline. As much of his irritation that made him an angry scientist, and thus why I have referred to him as such continuously, was his disagreements with Senpujing Industries executives that ridiculed his work and fired him. One of the workers at the auto plant actually recognizing him in this, and what he tried to do to protect what he could. Still, the battle ends with Joe losing to the Mike Kaiser and the other forces repelled. Toro having gotten his chance to see Ryujin Maru fight in full. But it turns out to be a Pyrrhic victory, as Purple has used this battle to abduct both Maito's paramour Sally, as well as Nia. Man, he is going to regret that later. Though they are apparently not the only ones. It only being brought up now that Queen Ciela, from Dunbine, basically the ruler of the nation Show and Marvel were working with against Drake Luft, as well as Relina Peacecraft from Gundam Wing, were also brought here and had been held in Dwokdar's clutches. We're through half the game now. Was there really no other time that this could have been brought up before this? Hell, when did they actually learn that fact? The reason, as explained thanks to a cutaway to Gurren Lagann's Rossiu resurrecting Lord Genome as a biocomputer, long story there, is because Dwokdar is an entity that acts as a living incarnation of darkness, and darkness grows stronger by swallowing concepts and ideals. And all of the women he's abducted in their own ways embodies a differing ideal. Peace, comfort, resilience, and for the lack of a better adjective, the future. Which make them important embodiments of hope for those who seek those very things. So what better to hold hostage and later sacrifice to increase the encroachment of distorting darkness? Now some have questioned why Nunnally v Britannia wasn't part of the game as consequence of this, considering she embodies all of those things for Lelouch, and this would allow the two siblings to have their own form of proper closure. And I have two potential reasons for why I feel they didn't, which would make me agree with the decision to omit her. And they are, 1, if they were ever reunited, neither would want to leave the other without some form of validating circumstance, which Resurrection did not supply. And 2, while Nunnally embodies those things for one person, she doesn't embody them for everyone else. Except for like 1 or 2 other people, where even then that is a maybe. Especially those aware of what she did, tricked into it by Schneisel or not. Thus, Relina more thoroughly covers the role for the world of Revolution as she doesn't have a body count. Though, as it turns out, the Mycenaean gods of Olympus have chosen to ally themselves with Dwokdar, as their goals align, to just simplify the factions at play once again. Turo getting to see up front a real no-holds battle between the factions, though it's not as simple as that. For when confronted, they declare that their goals are to save this world as well, and Dwokdar's actions facilitate that end? Why? They do not explain. Though considering End's true nature as a parasite, them keeping it either satiated or asleep, as the Keepers are doing, or drowning the world in darkness so it can't get the sustenance it needs so it would die in its sleep, are certainly 2 ways of going about it. Too bad that creating conflict is what feeds it enough to wake up to begin with. Almost as if it might have been a good idea to explain yourselves. Both the Great General of Darkness and Emperor of Darkness end up being summoned here for the battle, which honestly feels too early for an end boss antagonist like this to pop up. But in this case, they are a means to an end. as the sheer reality-warping presence of them on this plane of existence ends up summoning Mazinger Zero from its peace in the void between dimensions. So at last, we have finally reached the ultimate amalgamation of Zeros, Wing, Code, and Mazinger. You know, since we have the Wing Zero Rebellion color scheme for Wing Zero, I know that Mazinger is mostly black already, but I'd like to see a Rebellion repaint of Mazinger Zero as well. Though I'm probably not going to be the one to burn my Infinitism Zero for that. It is still an idea to see in the future. I intended to repaint my Wing Zero into Rebellion colors, but I just ran out of time to do so. Now, fortunately, X does not repeat what was already done perfectly regarding the Mazinger Zero storyline within Awakening inside the Edition Z Impact Mazinger, instead having it summoned as a recurring antagonist throughout the game, reflecting how Zero has the power to become a god or devil. In V, we saw how it was tamed into the divine god of super robots once Koji stopped being ruled by the angry AI of it. But this is the other side of the coin, with X treating it as a devilish machine when it's allowed to just rampage on its own. The fortunate thing about this is, without a proper pilot, Zero is powerful, but it is not invincible. The problem, of course, is, well, most of the usual suspects that could potentially have a chance to be able to defeat it aren't able to do so at the moment. Shinji, Gaishishio, and the Getter teams aren't here. Ange doesn't have access to the Vilcus's Discord Feather or its other space-time distortion abilities to disrupt Zero's access and awareness of abilities across the multiverse, and Tetsuya isn't in the Mazin Emperor G. Yet. Hell, of the assorted mecha series I'm aware of, the only other one beyond those that would stand a chance against it is actually Callan and the Gurren Satan, and for one central reason: the Radiant Wave Surger, as that device is a directed radiation wave intended to penetrate through armor and detonate superconductive materials through thermal expansion. And when it comes to those piloting mecha, it boils them alive and pops them like a pimple. Robot loses its pilot, entire unit goes limp.
質問。あなたの大事なものは何？自分の命だけなの。脅しのつもりか、イレブンが。さようなら。奪われる私の命がこの際。
Now, there is some disagreement on that thanks to that acting oddly against the power tier scaling present in Code Geass, but my rebuttal is Code Geass spends the entirety of R2 screwing Callan over explicitly for the reason of, too OP, please nerf. And she's still demonstrably this series' best pilot, as by the end it takes those who are exploiting supernatural abilities to even try to tie with her. And they still lost. The Satan's size and agility would be specific advantages over Zero for the most part, as if it were trying to swat a wasp when you're allergic, and break enough of Zero's internal systems and, well, it's going to have trouble either repairing them or using its multiversal access to literally part swap with other Mazingers, as we have already seen it can do that. Plus, it would end up being thematically appropriate for a god of mecha to have one of those who stand a chance against it to be the literal heavenly winged devil queen born under the red moon of the Crimson Lotus Hell. Now, of course, X gets some details wrong about Zero, such as it not tolerating the existence of other Mazingers. Which is wrong, because Zero can be awakened inside any Mazinger, so Zero having backup physical forms would be a good thing for it. But Zero swallowing light to embody darkness? Yeah, divide by zero errors happen because math and reason break down when you deal with black holes. But there is something important that happens in this stage with regards to the longer game. For like in many of the SRW games, there is a secret true ending route split that you can get if you do certain things across the game. And X's flags right here in the dead center of it. You need to have gotten Koji and Tetsuya to ace pilot status with a combined kill count of 80 between them by this stage. You need to have Koji or Tetsuya defeat the Great General of Darkness in this stage, and you need to reduce Mazinger Zero's hit points to under 30,000 by the end of the third turn after its first appearance. And that last one is not an insignificant task. As a consequence of this, the earlier Earthside versus Space-side route split that introduced Koji, you need to do the Earthside only as the prioritized route, if only to allow more of a buffer of battles to reach for ace pilot status. In fact, just telling you straight out, there is no reason to ever do any of the space route scenarios in this game. As thanks to an unacknowledged programming bug, if you do, and are trying to collect the secret character recruitment points, it doesn't actually give you them on the space routes. Whereas if you play just the Earth routes, those points are calculated differently, so you can end up getting those units by default if you just collect the points available from the normal story path scenarios. Which, honestly, skipping the space scenario routes, that's not a bad thing, due to how much those are overwhelmingly focused on G-Reco and Buddy Complex's story, which are both terrible, as well as bashing Char, despite how much the metatextual content of Universal Century repeatedly proves him fucking right. The best way to just counter Zero in this stage is, ironically, with Zero. Lelouch's tactical command map ability is continuously invaluable throughout the game, as every turn, the boosts he can cast on units near him can stack. So if you start the stage with him boosting Koji and Tetsuya, and keep at that every turn until Zero shows up, then there will be nothing that will stop the pair from casting Longinus Smasher for a quick and easy curb stomp of an Ultimate Class Devil. But it's not enough to just cave Zero's head in, as Zero, as said, can regenerate any external damage. Koji and Tetsuya acting to try and destroy it alongside their own Mazingers, so Zero won't have a pull to this world or host Mazinger to inhabit. And it doesn't work. The Great General saying they fell beyond the karmic horizon, which I assume to be the edge of the metafictional black hole Zero exists beyond. And I make that assumption as it is the only explanation I have for what happens after this. For when Koji and Tetsuya are in this void, the others use the Vilcus and the Saikamu abilities of the Universal Century mechs to bridge the gap, leading to the pair waking up within it, where they are approached by the spirit of Zeus that had been left in their versions of Mazinger, which encourages them to continue to fight on, leading to them connecting to the AI systems of two other Mazin mecha that exist out within the realms of possibility, permitting Tetsuya to once more gain the assistance of Mazin Emperor G, while for Koji, he instead boards the Mazin Kaiser. The Mazin Kaiser was the original upgrade mecha for Koji in the Mazinger franchise, which, ironically enough, much like Mazin Emperor G, was created by Go Nagai explicitly for Super Robot Wars, having felt that the original Mazinger he created in the 1970s was starting to fall behind the power levels and innovation scene of mecha anime since its creation of piloted super robots. And in my opinion, things like Gao Gaigar's Broken Magnum Attack might have been something of an inspiration to Mazin Kaiser's revamp, considering, well, Mazin Kaiser's rocket punches also spin.
出てきたな、黒幕。覚悟しやがれよ。飛ばせ鉄拳、切り裂け超合金の刃。ターボスマッシャーパンチ。いっけー。
魔人カイザーよ、さすがと言っておこう。
And much like Shingeta Robo, the machine first appeared in an SRW game before being given its own primary work, those being Super Robot Wars F Final in 1998 and the Mazin Kaiser OVA series in 2001 respectively. And I really like Mazin Kaiser. While his design is trumped by Zero, there's a reason why Mazin Kaiser's Infinitism release was on my set for a few years.
行くぞ、暗黒大将軍。 勝つのはマジンガーだ。原子一つ残らず燃え尽きろ。ファイヤーブラスター。カイザーの炎は未来を照らす光だ。
私は破れる。未経年の野望もここまでか。
But yeah, even with the boundaries of reality literally threatening to collapse so Zero would come and destroy Alworth anyways, then every villain faction of this game is each going to cause the end of Alworth, leaving the Knights to find a way to resolve all this through a means that won't leave them dead. Though if you did all the stuff to unlock the game's true ending in the last state, you also unlock the bonus stage, Worst vs. Best, which features Koji and Tetsuya training to bring out the true capabilities of their new machines, only for that to summon Zero to them because of that idiotic retcon about it wanting to erase all Mazinger machines from existence besides itself. Which, as I said, don't make sense, and is a retcon that only exists to serve the narrative, not the characters. Zero summons alternative versions of Dr. Hell's greatest creations, which the two then have to smash, the pair unlocking a completely new to the franchise team attack between the two machines for their efforts. As a reminder, Mazda Emperor G was created explicitly for Super Robot Wars V. Before that point, Tetsuya didn't have an upgrade mech by which to let them have a team attack with them. And it is impressive.
光子力は可能性の光。その力で未来を切り開く。たぎれ魔人皇帝。俺たちの怒りで燃えろ。魔人総攻撃。
理解不能。理解不能。たとえ神でも悪魔も
俺たちを止めることはできない。
Moving on, we reach the Dwokdar-controlled town of Holywood, where we run into Fa Yuiri from Zeta Gundam, who is still caring for Camille Badan, as Camille is still suffering the damage from the psychic attack Patama Shirako inflicted upon him at the end of Zeta. She brought him here after they ended up in Alworth, as they heard the region had healing properties. But the actions of Dwokdar General Axe Smoggle, yes, seriously, we're now dealing with a Captain Planet villain, have turned this place into an EPA violation and Asthmatic's hellhole, with him being supported by Neo-Zeon forces that are not part of Char's faction, but instead are part of Haman Karn's, that including Mashimir, one of the major antagonists of Double Zeta. I didn't really get much into Double Zeta's plot when I reviewed V, as they didn't use much of Double Zeta's plot to begin with. The most I commented on it was stating how bullshit Haman Karn's death was, when she really wasn't the villain deserving of it versus others in the storyline. And Mashimir was certainly not one that I mentioned. But it's easy to describe his single character in 4 words. He simps for Haman. That's it. Beginning and end. Unfortunately, Haman is not in this game. How X amalgamates UC Gundam's timeline together still has this be in post-series for Double Zeta, just with some of the people who should not have died still being around. And there is one, I'm not referring to Mashimir with this, that should have stayed dead as he was the true villain of it and not Haman. But unfortunately, we are not there yet. Mashimir, however, is not himself, having been brainwashed, somehow, into a psychic berserker Judao has to try and talk down, making him potentially recruitable if you do it right. As for the pollution, it's revealed that a Sokai treasure known as the Good Seeds can cleanse the region, and as is told to us by Tora O, Smoggle is in possession of them. I mean, if they're the one thing that can stop you, it makes sense to take them yourself so you can lock them up away from the heroes. So we just need to assault Smoggle's base to fix this. Though again, this isn't made easy because of Mashimir. His recruitment conditions, however, are a bit annoying, as you need to specifically use the Persuade command with Judao to trigger the event, and then defeat him, which makes Smoggle come out, waving the good seeds around to taunt us, which Himiko outright steals from a general once again. When he tries to sick Mashimir on her, that's where the rest of this event triggers. Mashimir stopping upon seeing Fa on the ground, and the Zeta moving on its own to defend her. Fa's words, somehow, bring him back to sanity, as his berserker rage was all out of mourning for Haman, who he's aware has died. But the Zeta moving on its own? Yeah, this story says that's Camille's lost soul, which caused his mental break, as it had been displaced into the Zeta, and it acted to protect Fa, with Camille becoming aware again thanks to it being in close proximity to his body, with him reboarding the Zeta to join the fight.
このタイミングでゼータを通して俺の力が広がっていく。みんなの力を貸してくれ。行けー！
With Smoggle's defeat, we destroy all the equipment he used to poison the area, the good seeds permitting the greenery to return quickly, which brings us to our next route split. Lelouch being inspired by the blooming plants to try and learn of Alworth's creation myth, as it's becoming clear that End is the root of all other problems, with in ancient times a world being born alongside End, which flourished after an enormous conflict between the sides of light, Walter's dragons and also Lord Genome, against those of darkness, the Mycenaean gods, which ultimately split the world into extremes of light and dark power, and other settlers to come upon it independently, those representing both the Cross-Lounge characters and also the Nadia backstory group, with the Keepers meant to keep them all in balance, and they have completely failed. Lelouch wanted to know all this, as he realized that everything we've been experiencing is repeating the same pattern of the ancient war, and that can help them moving forward. The Knights agreeing to split their forces so as to prevent either of the major antagonist camps to gain a major advantage, as while they've been pressing Dwokdar hard, everyone allied with Mitsurugi has been having free reign to do what they want to the rest of the planet. The route split this time being whether to focus on the Dwokdar assault force, or the one that's going to raid Mitsurugi. I decided to do the Mitsurugi route first this time, which is done by all the Gundam and Buddy Complex cast members because I just want to get them the hell out of the way. Which begins with a storm forming over the land of Mana, leading to both Alba and Hina ending up on the Island of Isolated Lovers! And people who have not seen Sunrise's library really thought I was exaggerating with how prevalent the repetition of this plot became after Gundam Seed. Due to the storm, the pair end up falling off a cliff, Alba saving Hina, who tries to explain his situation, but does it in the terms of, "Don't you remember? You brought me here!" When he doesn't understand that this hasn't happened to her yet. This is not his Hina. He can't grasp the fact that just because he time traveled doesn't by default mean that she has as well. He should know this by this point, considering their previous encounters. It's only when he decides to drop it and gets it through his thick head that this Hina is different than his Hina, that the two even begin to function in this expected short-lived alliance trope this plot engenders, with Hina letting slip that something externally has caused the political changes that led to her homeland of Zogilla beginning its worldwide campaign. Though exposition on that is broken up by Dio and Hero using the Zero system to expand the coverage of the coupling system, that's not how the Zero system works! But then again, if I were to harp on that consistently, I'd find the grand majority of SRW games that feature Wing are actually guilty of this, which is a lot due to Hero's actor Hikaru Midorikawa being a huge fan of the franchise. Hell, at this point, he is basically an uncredited playtester for all of them. Anyways, that allows them to find where Alba is, arriving at the same time Hina's father and Bison, you know, the pilot that is simping for Hina, to also get to this island to take her back. A battle breaking out because of that. The Luxon being captured by Zogilla as consequence. So now they will have the coupling technology as well. With the Zogilla Elite Corps actions actually breeding the first seeds of dissent in Hina as they fire on the island to try and kill the opposing force's pilots on order of their chief administrator. But only managed to gravely wound Hina's father, with Bison blaming Alba and all his allies for something his government ordered to happen. Yeah, going to spoil this now as it ends up being really hypocritical and only compounds the problems of Buddy Complex overall. The chief administrator that ordered that attack that Bison is getting all pissy about, it was ordered by Bison himself. Specifically, the time displaced Bison from his relative future. Thus, everything he blames Alba for is in fact ones he himself ends up causing. But because of the nature of how wonky this time loop is, this is one of several events that had to be deliberately triggered, despite them having to happen independently in order to maintain the track by which things go. If the events that lead to and cause a time loop are not independently self-sustaining, then they are supposed to fail. So this attack should have happened without it being ordered to make the story work. And ironically, the only reason this attack is ordered from a narrative perspective is to show that there is some malicious mastermind waiting behind Bison that is manipulating everything that's just revealed to be Bison himself. So doing so like this harms the overall story, as it is a point of contradiction regarding the nature of how a time travel story works. As Bison, due to him hating how things would have turned out, with the time to think on his actions, would think about ways to prevent what he hated from happening, instead of causing them himself unnecessarily. As again, the only reason this moment happens is Bison's intervention, which would not have been there in the first loop to threaten Hina's loyalty like this does, that sets off what follows. Now I'm betting some viewing this might bring up something like Eobard Thawne, the time-traveling villain, the Reverse Flash, from the comic series and TV show The Flash, as an example of someone else doing the same thing in such a scenario. And you would be both right and wrong. Eobard's desired revenge on the Flash happens solely out of Eobard's hatred of the Flash, Barry Allen, as Barry unintentionally ruined the best day of Eobard's life when Barry ends up teleported to Eobard's time and saves the people that Eobard views he was supposed to. The difference is the time loop that Eobard becomes part of is 100% a causal loop, where he decides, after idolizing the Flash throughout his life because he is from the future, this event twists Eobard's perspective until he breaks from sanity, and travels back in time to ruin Barry's life, culminating in him killing Barry's mom and altering time in such a way that the death becomes part of Barry's origin story and motivation to be a hero that saves people. And then because of that, Eobard becomes trapped in the past as he changed his own personal timeline. Though I should specify this is in the 2014 series. To then get back to his life in the future, he has to then create the circumstances of Barry gaining the powers to become the Flash and restore time to a semblance of what it was, only with himself now part of those events. This thus becomes a self-sustaining loop because every step part of it is motivated by a character's own actions, and Eobard's own ego that refuses to accept that he is in the wrong, and his irrational hate is destroying the very opportunities and better world he wanted for himself, as he made it his mission in life, even if it kills him, to destroy Barry Allen. Future Bison, however, lacks this rationale for his motivations, and most of them act at cross purposes to his goals. Eobard is oblivious and blind to the very causal loop he's become a part of, that he can escape just by letting go of his hatred for Barry, which he refuses to, and that destroys him. Whereas for Bison, he knows what's going on, and what he can do to break the loop and change time to his advantage. Make it so Zogula would be able to win the war or avoid the circumstances of the war entirely. And doing so would make it so Alba, the one he hates, would not be able to get close to Hina and steal her from his past self. This attack is what triggers that shift of Hina walking away from his past self. And even if future Bison still needed the coupler tech to eventually create the time travel tech to sustain his own existence, he didn't need to do anything else here to stoke Bison's hate of Alba by making this attack happen. Just omit this detail, that future Bison's actions are what causes the attack that cements Hina's eventual defection, and both new and old Bison would be oblivious to the trigger, which is what would make the loop self-sustaining, as it happens independently of any active changes to the timeline future Bison would be making. Oh, and speaking of, this is why the Zero system keeps acting up around Bison, because the future it can predict for him is snarled with both the past and future by looping back on itself. But yeah, Hina's father dies, revealing that Hina herself was adopted after being found on a battlefield as a child, which to Hina lends credence to Alba's insane story. This tying back to the chicken and egg paradox problem I described previously, with Hina saying as much angering Bison for Hina appearing to sympathize with the enemy, and demands Hina just do as he says. Dude, take the hint. She's just not that into you, and this is exactly why. Like, I don't get why Bison's a recruitable character in this game, as even if you look past his future self manipulations, the guy's a scumbag. Zex, however, has received a coded transmission, revealing that not only does Zogilla have a defector acting behind enemy lines, but their forces have also gained access to a way back to their own world. Which begs the question why they're still involved with Alworth, as they have their own war against their world to perform, and their tiny nation would not have the resources to maintain 2 world wars, despite all the resupply they're receiving. It's just not logistically feasible. Yet that is the case for one and one reason alone. The Buddy Complex characters need their upgrade mechs. I'm not kidding. Even when they bring up this contradiction inside the game, which admittedly is smart, that's what it all really does break down to. This segueing into a story segment that first showcases a muzzled future Bison to us under an assumed pseudonym, acting as the man from the past that knows all as he lived it, working with an actual mad scientist named Han, introduced previously, to develop Zogilla's own coupler tech from the basis of Alba's, and taking things a step further by selecting Hina and Bison as their new coupler system test subjects. However, due to Hina's recent experiences and Bison's abusive behavior, they have to inject Hina with mind-altering drugs to get her to agree, which defeats the purpose of the coupling system. As the problem with Zogilla's version of the technology is instead of making it a communal system that syncs up 2 people, the Zogillan model is based so one person becomes slave to the primary's will, and not made any better that Bison is not at all compatible with the system. Thus why it required Hina to be drugged to begin with. These two assault the Amerian forces off-screen to show their power, the Twilight Knights only learning of this later, before they themselves end up attacked as they learn of where Mitsurugi is opening up dimension gates, them attempting to use it to get their own reinforcements, with Zogilia attempting to prevent this event, and ultimately failing, the lot being transported back to the Buddy Complex Earth, where Alba and Dio get their upgrade mechs, the Luxon and Braedion, next, which they use to take out the enemy commander.
このルクシオンネクストなら俺たちで状況を打開する。そういうことなら乗った。やれると信じる。俺たちの力を合わせれば。この感覚。俺と今一つだ。これが俺たちの力だ。
The downside of the next mecha is, alongside everything that made the previous units effective, the memory bleed over effect from their coupling has become immensely stronger, when coupled, it becoming difficult to distinguish the other's memories from their own. So you have some issues around depth of personality with that. At least you would if this was a better executed series. Especially with how dangerous such would be if multiple people were to be slaved to a dominant coupler, where one person literally overwrites the subordinates to just become cloned persona of the first. But I don't think Buddy Complex ever really chose to explore those ramifications of such a system. It certainly wasn't done so in other series that have tried to use it, and yes, I count Pacific Rim in that. Wait, Pacific Rim was 2013. Did Sunrise rip off drift compatibility for the coupler system? Though this fight does confirm for Zex that the one who contacted him was in fact the enemy commander on this mission, Alfred, as insurance due to him disagreeing with the course Zogilia is on as a country due to the actions of future Bison. Everyone taking the warp gate back to Alworth to continue distracting the Mitsurugi Alliance. Though we do have a bit of a scene between future Bison and Stupid Hair. The story amalgamation once again making Cross-Ange bear the weight of supporting and facilitating Buddy Complex's inclusion in all this. As this makes Buddy Complex's absolutely asinine time loop be all one big experiment of embryos on the nature and malleability of time. Which is a straight-up mistake. Yes, Stupid Hair is a control freak. It comes hand in hand with having a god complex. The problem, and this is the key, is he's a false god. He can't actually manipulate things he doesn't have a direct hand in. So him claiming to be behind a time loop that he had no hand in originally, or making him the origin of it in this story, as opposed to a convergence of events which is necessary to create a causal loop? No, it gives him too much free power to manipulate things beyond himself. Especially as it ignores entirely the crack in his ego that is Embryo being a bad creator, as everything he makes is fundamentally defective. With him just hiding these defects as he can't bear the reality that he is an imperfect being, making more imperfect beings. And again, this isn't to amalgamate the stories of multiple series as it was in V. It's to make one series bear the weight of another's inclusion instead of that series justifying its own existence.
Justify your existence. What contribution have you made? I've given pleasure to the world because I have such a beautiful ass. That's your case? You need more? Some might say that's a pretty shallow argument. Some might say I'm a pretty shallow guy.
Oh, and future Bison's reasons for collaborating with Stupid Hair? He wants to kill him! Yeah, get in line. Up in space, Klim attempts again to negotiate with Toasanga, appealing to the Reihunten faction regarding the return to Earth to get them on their side, and in hopes Klim can also get the Venus Globe on their side, as the Venus Globe are the ones that control the means of producing and recharging G-Reco's photon batteries, as well as administering the Gundam-related technologies of the era, them providing the G-Lucifer earlier being one of their acts of supporting repopulation of Earth. And Klim negotiating all of this basically because he's out of options to obtain a strike force against everyone else, which has failed, as the majority of the Venus Globe has also joined up with Mitsurugi under Embryo, with them threatening the Serrano 5 colony Toasanga is situated upon, including where Char himself is, and among the antagonizers being Yazan Gable of the Titans from Zeta Gundam, and Rakan of Neo Zeon from Double Zeta, with the lot uncaring of the casualties they'd incur to a faction that doesn't serve Embryo, or their vision of the Reconquista, which it's revealed that the Venus Globe's colonists want back on Earth as well, as the colonies around Venus were so shoddily built that the cosmic radiation they got inflicted with has started to damage their genetics, meaning they have to go back to Earth so as to not die out. The Monsters from Venus was not as catchy a title as The Witch from Mercury. Also, there must be a lot of space radiation in the Universal Century timeline, as scientists in the real world have been studying the cosmic radiation problem for a long time, and have created, as of 2023, composite materials that block a little under half of all potential cosmic radiation from celestial bodies. But the amount of exposure and the chances these materials may become less effective over time is the reason why space missions, even more than bone demineralization, are usually kept as short as they are. It is such a severe problem regarding the possibility of living in space long term that is one which would in every way need to be resolved before any effort to build long-term space colonies could even begin, or even possibly colonize Mars due to the much weaker EM field around the world not dispersing as much cosmic radiation as Earth does. Which is again the problem with Universal Century Gundam and Reguild as proxy, as this is a big deal that would either need to be taken off the table as a drawback before anything else in the setting can start, and thus it's invalid as a cause for later actions as it is for Toasanga and the Venus Globe, or the actual problem is the Universal Century and Reguild Century elite classes that ignore the potential danger of cosmic radiation for literally thousands of years until it's literally devastating their civilizations, and so shoddily built the colonies over time that every single one of them becomes a death trap. Which I seriously doubt happened after Earth's ruling elite themselves moved to space after Earth became uninhabitable. But if that is so, then the people are still not addressing the root cause, that is the elite class, which screwed them all over, and the colonies that would need to be rebuilt or reinforced. Or, and this makes it even worse for all of UC Gundam across the board, that the various series where the villains of them want to return to Earth or take the ruling class out of power, yeah, this would make all of them collectively 100% right, and the protagonist stopping them irrevocably in the wrong, as those protagonists would be sentencing them all to death. I mean, it is the literal only way left at this point to make Char retroactively the bad guy due to him wanting humanity to live in space and no longer have their souls weighed down by gravity. I know that line will never stop being dumb. It's just, it is something that is so setting-breaking to still be an issue, it potentially leaves the entirety of UC Gundam as an idiot plot that no one noticed it to not resolve it for over 1,000 years. I've got issues with a lot of UC Gundam storytelling, but I don't seriously believe it as a whole deserves that distinction. Now, if I'm being completely fair to this plot point, this is not the first time cosmic radiation poisoning has come up as a plot point in Mobile Suit Gundam. Specifically, it was done so in Mobile Suit Gundam the 8th MS Team, where the final antagonist of that story was suffering from radiation poisoning caused by cosmic rays, which had deteriorated his mental stability. Likewise, Gundam the Witch from Mercury actually did bring up cosmic radiation as a plot point in it poisoning one of the main characters, so they could no longer live in their original biological body. But worse for G-Reco stating this is, they live in a setting that has possessed electromagnetic shield technology that would repel cosmic radiation, and that technology has existed since literally UC 0083, with the invention of the I-field generator that scatters electromagnetic radiation away from a specified area, which is how mobile weapons equipped with the technology even reflect beam technology to begin with, to say nothing about the later developed beam shield technology that's been around since 0093, and those were over 1,000 years ago from the perspective of those from the Reguild Century, meaning they should have even more advanced electromagnetic barrier technology to make the issue of cosmic radiation a complete non-issue. So this is once more a series from Tomino that already has a solution to what they say is the cause of their conflict, but no one actually considers using that solution. Moreover, if they have suffered genetic damage from being in space, then the space-based civilization should already have died out, as such genetic damage cascades fast, only needing a couple generations to wipe out those inflicted. If they're still around over 1,000 years later, then the problem is not cosmic radiation. You're either just being assholes or there's something that is only recently wrong with where you're living. As in the 50 years that our world has been venturing into space, we've already found means by which to deal with half the issue. It's why it's not been something of major concern in most Gundam series, and only began to be brought up seriously in G-Witch, where actual space travel and residency is very new, as is assumed in most of the other Gundam timelines that such is an issue that had already found a way to be resolved before colonization efforts would even begin. Klim and his subordinate Mick are given new Venusian-originating machines to try and stop them succeeding in holding them off until the rest of our units arrive to defend the colony. The Knights try and reason with the Venusian forces, but that fails entirely, as all of them are too focused on finally getting what they want from serving Stupid Hair, who, from their view, is already a foregone conclusion to win the war that's brewing due to the masses he controls and the gates he can create, meaning they can't convince them that morally it's the wrong thing, as it's far too late to make that appeal to their forces, which is exactly what Char had been warning them all about when we last visited Serrano 5, that had they not worked with him back then the only option would be for this to devolve into everyone fighting again. He had been trying to avoid that. I'll once more reiterate, Char was trying to head this off, but Amuro said no, and convinced the others that Char was in the wrong. And now we're fighting people we could have gotten on our side had they been approached openly earlier for no other reason than spite. And because they didn't, it has led to the Venus globe not just being manipulated by Mitsurugi alongside everyone else to get what they want, but them also being deceived and made the pawns of the actual villain of Double Zeta Gundam as well. Glemmy fucking Todo. By game mechanics, the designers wanted to give players more recruitment points for some of the recruitable Why do I have G-Witch written there?